Hi again, everyone. I'm Lewis, and this is the musical Lewis. And today, I'm talking of all good music based on my good music taste. And welcome to another Bon Jovi album review. This is the second in the Bon Jovi series, and I'm gonna I'm gonna do this in a specific order because this is the Circle that came out in 2009, and this is I did say in the last video that Have a Nice Day was my first Bon Jovi album that I've ever listened to. This album is the first new Bon Jovi album that came out in 2009. This album came out in 2009, and 15 years later, this is still the original CD that I've still got today. Um, it's a 12-track album. The tracks on the back. Oops, sorry. We have We Weren't Born to Follow, When We Were Beautiful, Work for the Working Man, Superman Tonight, Bullet, Thorn in My Side, Live Before You Die, Broken Promised Land, Love's the Only Rule, Fast Cars, Happy Now, and Learn to Love. And let's open her up. The CD's case is broken, by the way. There's the CD. And here's the booklet for all the lyrics inside, and pictures on the back of all the Bon Jovis, and just give me a second while I put this back together. And that's in the back of the CD. And this album was a Christmas present when I first got it in 2009. Hang on, the booklet. And also for Christmas, oops, sorry for knocking the camera. Also for Christmas Day in 2009, I also got Nickelback's Dark Horse and Keen's Perfect Symmetry on the same day. So basically, for Christmas this year, it was this one, Nickelback's Dark Horse, and Keen's Perfect Symmetry. I think I had a couple more CDs, but I can't remember now. But this was the first Bon Jovi album new Bon Jovi album I've ever got when I first started listening to the band as a teenager. And I do love this artwork, by the way. I think it's probably one of the best Bon Jovi artworks in terms of how it sounds. And this was a Bon Jovi album that I played to death when I first listened to it. This was the first time that I actually enjoyed a Bon Jovi album from start to finish. Have a Nice Day was kind of close, but for the longest time, this was my favourite Bon Jovi album for the longest time. And it's still one of my favourites today, actually. But in recent years, one of their recent albums has really topped this at this point. And I must say, I actually really do enjoy this album a lot. Starting with let's go through the tracks. We Weren't Born to Follow opens up the album nicely. It's one of my favourite songs off the album, and one of my favourites from all of Bon Jovi at this point. I do love the Greatest Hits version, and I've also got it on vinyl with the Greatest Hits album as well. And the reason, and also this album was on vinyl for the longest time, but it's not easy to come by now, and it's very expensive to buy on vinyl now if you want to get it. So I'm just happy I got it with the CD. But We Weren't Born to Follow, I do have it on vinyl on the Vinyl Greatest Hits, which I will probably show you when I do a vinyl collection video at some point. Sorry. When We Were Beautiful is one of my favourite songs off Bon Jovi. This song took a long time to grow on me when I first heard it way back in 2009. Um, it's still one. It's one of those songs that's a bit of an odd place sort of song, but I have seen the film of the album as well, and the documentary When We Were Beautiful of the same name. I have seen the film of it, and it's quite a good film actually. I do recommend checking it out. It is on Amazon Prime as well. It's on that film as well. Work for the Working Man is also one of my favourite songs off this album as well. The first time I'd listened to this, I actually listened to this on Christmas Day when it came out in 2009, was the first time I heard it. And then I've listened to it again and again and again over the course of throughout 2010. Not just listening to it from my computer, but from this CD, but I also listened through it through my iPod and also my old computer that I used to have at the time. Um, and every time I've listened to this album, it was kind of always one of my favorites to play every time, as I said earlier. Superman Tonight, I absolutely adored that song when I first heard it. It was one of the songs I really did enjoy on first listen. And obviously, it was quite an odd song to start with for a Bon Jovi to do something like that, but it really worked the more times I heard it. And also Bullet. Bullet is probably one of the heaviest songs on the album. It's one of my favourites on the album as well. And personally, I think it's such an interesting track. It's such one of the best songs on the album, in my personal opinion. And then Thorn in My Side, which slows the album down a little bit. These next two songs slow the album down a little bit here. Thorn in My Side was a decent track. One of those songs that actually grew on me the more I listened to it, actually. And personally, for a Bon Jovi album of this caliber, this style, it actually works for a Bon Jovi album when you got songs in the middle where it slows it down a little bit. When We Were Beautiful did slow it down when the album first got going, but these two are the main ones that slow it down a little bit. And then Live Before You Die came next, which I think Live Before You Die is one of my favourite ballads on the album, and I love it more than Thorn in My Side, but Live Before You Die is the more superior of the ballads, in my opinion. I know some people don't really like it, but I personally think it's one of the best songs on the album. Broken Promised Land came next, which is a bit weird because it's three words, but it's pushed as just one word, which is pretty weird. But as a song, it actually means something that I quite like, and it's the longest song on the album, actually. Well, it's not quite the longest song, but it's near enough. When We Were Beautiful is the longest song. Broken Promised Land is almost 5 minutes, and a lot of the songs on this album are roughly around 5 minutes anyway, so... And it's still a really good song, actually. It's one of my favourites of the album as well. Love's the Only Rule. I did like the song quite a bit. It's not the worst. Just like Wildflower off Have a Nice Day, it's one of those songs that's quite weak, but it's still quite enjoyable to listen to. It's one of those songs that I actually quite like to listen to, but I don't listen to it as often as some of the others. And it's such an interesting song. Love's the Only Rule, and of course, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit on some of the other album reviews, but John also has a bit of a double entendre when it comes to writing lyrics, and especially on some of the later albums specifically. But this was one of the first times he did it on this album, and Love's the Only Rule is one of the songs that I actually quite enjoy, even though it's not one of my top favourites, but it's still enjoyable. Fast Cars is next. Again, one of my favourites, but I'm gonna kind of gonna say to Eric's house, who doesn't really like the song that much, and that's fine. But to me, I personally enjoy it. I think it's one of my favourites from Bon Jovi, and definitely one of the best songs on the album, personally. Happy Now, same with Thorn in My Side. It's one of the songs that I wasn't too keen on at first, but the more times I listen to the album, it's actually grown on me quite a lot. It's definitely one of my favorites now than it was back in when I first listened to the album. I mean, it's been a long time since I heard it in full, but as a Bon Jovi album, it's one of my personal favorites out of all of Bon Jovi's catalog. I mean, and of course, Happy Now has been kind of done to death by a lot of musicians after Bon Jovi. Take That did it a year later, and Will Young did it a year after that. But it's an interesting track in many ways, but and then finally we've Learn to Love, which is the closing track. Now, Learn to Love, I love this. I love how this album ends with that song. It's it's such a beautiful ending to a Bon Jovi album, and personally, um, I mean, there are other Bon Jovi closing tracks that are stronger than that are just as good, but Learn to Love is the strongest of all of Bon Jovi's closing tracks, and especially with Harley Harley, that's kind of him saying hallelujah, basically. Harley Harley's like they're saying hallelujah, and then one breath away, and then to your judgment day, and then they add the bit at the end where Harley Harley, and that's how it is, and then you got to learn to love the world you're living in, which to me personally, that is so wonderful for a Bon Jovi song like that, and obviously, this is, in my opinion, out of all the Bon Jovi albums, this kind of closed the best period for Bon Jovi, in my opinion, between 1986 with Slippery When Wet and to this one. So 23 years of brilliant albums from, and there were some hit and misses in the middle, but this one kind of closed the best period of Bon Jovi, in my opinion, because, as I said, between Slippery When Wet up to this one, I think personally, out of all the Bon Jovi albums that came out over that period, this was kind of the end of the great stuff they were putting out, because after this album, they started to really go downhill a bit after this album. And personally, I think, out of all the Bon Jovi albums, I personally think that this is the one I keep returning to when I want to listen to any 2000s Bon Jovi. Even though I haven't listened to this album for quite a long time, it's still an album that I still enjoy, and personally one of my favourite Bon Jovi albums that I've ever heard in my times of listening to them as a teenager, and I do recommend it. It's definitely an album that I personally recommend out of all the Bon Jovi albums that came out before it. It's probably hard to come by CD wise, like some of the other Bon Jovi CDs are. And if you got this on vinyl somewhere, you'd probably keep hold of it because it'd probably be worth a lot by now. I think if I was going to rank this, I'm going to rank this quite high in my ranking. And I think, as I said, this was my favourite Bon Jovi album for a long time. But one of their later albums actually tops this one, and it'll be a shock to my listeners who watched this video for what can beat this album. So, and personally, and I know some people would say that Slippery When Wet and New Jersey are better than this album, but That's totally fine, and I completely respect your opinions. But for me, this is the best Bon Jovi album one of the best Bon Jovi albums, and for the longest time, this was my top favorite for the longest time. Anyway, I'm going to end this video now, and I'll see you again hopefully for another Bon Jovi review sometime. I'll see you again pretty soon. Goodbye for now.